What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and I want to apologize because once again, my playtest vlog series is going to be just me and not the rest of the party or the DM. But we actually got to play again on Tuesday, and we ended up running a lot longer because we were in basically the entire game session for just about 3 hours was all one big combat. Um, Maybe not 100% of the time, and there was a break in the middle there. But either way, it was a massive combat. And this was the first, I would call it, real combat that we've had, which had like multiple enemies. It had terrain and different aspects of it. It took place at night. Two of the characters are humans. There's a lot of mechanics there. And we actually got to test out the One D&D mechanics. And like, I specifically, as the only character playing 100% One D&D. So let me break it down for you. We have 3 players. I am playing a human thief rogue, and I'm 100% One D&D playtest, nothing else. We have a Shatterkai ranger. He is the Mordenkainen's Monsters of the Multiverse version of the Shatterkai. He is the base ranger is from the One D&D playtest, and his subclass is the Gloomstalker subclass. Because the playtest rule says you can mix and match, we're attempting to try this as best as we can. And then the other character is a human Battlemaster fighter, and he is 100% base 5e, no playtest at all. So we're trying to see how things work. Does somebody seem more powerful than another? How does things work out? So it's also interesting, and just as a point of fact, we don't really have much healing. The only healing we have is what's provided from our ranger. Other than that, that's all we have. So this was a large forested combat where there was a bridge with a stream with a stone bridge over it, a bunch of trees. It takes place at night. Obviously, our ranger is the only one who can see in the dark, and the fighter and myself as the rogue, I had a lantern, he had a torch, and we were trying to figure out what was going to happen. And there were several enemies. If as a reminder, this is a Greek mythology themed campaign. So we had like forest nymphs, and it looks like people were doing sort of almost siren style, luring people away to do some form of like ritualistic sacrifice. Seemed to be what was happening. We were trying to stop it. So what did I use and learn as far as the combat went on? So as a thief rogue, some of the things that I will once again commend that I enjoy is the change to the way two-handed or two-weapon fighting works, right? This concept of you have 2 weapons. One, if they're both light weapons, then you can attack with one as part of the same attack action, make an attack with the other. That was used the entire time throughout the combat when I wasn't using any kind of ranged combat, in that I could then bonus action hide, dash, whatever the case may be. So that was very much appreciated on my end. Another thing that I would say I'm just scrolling down to my rogue here in the 1D&D playtest. We also tried to use as much of, or I did anyway, the new rules glossary where it was applicable. So I'm trying to think. Not too much was different for sneak attack. And yes, so I did make use of I'll come over here and show you the Thief Rogue's climb speed and jump distance from second story work, because I did have the ability to climb. I also did make a sleight of hand check. It was more just kind of to add insult to injury to the enemy that I was facing. Fighting her, and then like I stole, like she had a crown on her head, and the DM let me make a sleight of hand check to basically swap the crown, and I rolled stupid good, so she let it fly. But if we were to go to, I also took a feat from the 1D&D playtest when I hit level 4. I took the new feat Durable, this one here, which is increases your constitution by 1, you have advantage on death saving throws, and speedy recovery. As a bonus action, you can expend one of your hit dice, roll the die, and regain a number of hit points equal to the roll. Now, at first, I didn't think I was actually going to get much use of this as a rogue because I was using my bonus action to hide primarily. However, it actually worked out in the long run because when I ended up finding myself engaged in melee combat, fighting with 2 scimitars, then I found out, okay, well, I'm stuck in combat and I don't want to try to run away because I don't want to lose this enemy. I want to stay in combat with her, not let her escape. It allowed me to then heal myself up a little bit with the durable feat as a bonus action, which was pretty nice. The only thing I wish is I do wish that it lets you add your constitution modifier to the speedy recovery healing. Having now play tested it, just rolling again as a rogue a d8. Again, obviously, I guess if you're a barbarian and you're rolling a d12, this could be a substantially more impactful healing. But it is something that is a bonus action, and it is nice that the new long rest rules give you all of your hit dice back, which is nice. So like I'm not afraid to expend it. Another thing that I will say that came up is my playtest humans inspiration that you receive daily. Once per long rest, when you wake up, you get inspiration. And I did use the new version of Lucky as well. And I used all of that inspiration as well as the 3 lucky points that I had during this combat to, in one instance, use it to self-trigger my own sneak attack damage by rolling with advantage, which I thought was pretty good. And then a couple times just to deal with saving throws. So if we were to go to the newest playtest, which is the Cleric one here, and scroll down, I will tell you that I had mentioned in my last video the biggest issue we ran across was guidance and the whole do you fail or not. In combat, it works significantly better. So one of the characters was attempting to grapple somebody and making the kind of athletics check to make the grapple, and they failed. So guidance was used to attempt to turn that failure into a success, and it actually was enough to do so and allowed them to grapple the person they were attempting to grapple, which was cool to see in combat. I will also say that resistance got a lot of use. The new version of resistance, where if you fail a saving throw, you can roll a d4 and add to it. I don't think it actually turned any of the failures into successes, but there were some instances where the ranger, who's the only one who has the spellcasting, decided, oh, hey, I think I'm going to use my reaction to cast resistance and hopefully turn your failed saving throw into a success. Because we were dealing with a lot of, again, like nymph type, like, or fate, forest spirit type creatures. There was a lot of charm effects going around, so not failing those was critical. Let's see. What other things came up? Oh, you know what did come up was, well, here's the new version of guidance. I decided, we used the, for me anyway, I'm probably going to use this going forward, the hide action and the hidden condition. And I do think these are vast improvements over what exists in 5e, because I think it makes it a lot clearer to understand. So what happened was I was kind of like pseudo out in the open. It's dark. I had a hooded lantern with only the 5 feet of dim light shining from it, and I kind of put that down. And I was just a distance away from people, but again, as a human character, I couldn't see in the dark, and I just told the DM that I wanted to hide. Now, was this base 5e? In theory, I don't know if I'm hidden, because I can't see if these creatures can see me. So I was just like, I'm just going to try to hide right where I am. Kind of, sort of out in the open. And then we went and looked it up, and it turns out, no, I can't. Well, argument could be made that I could, because if you're in darkness, full darkness, you are considered to be heavily obscured. However, all of these enemies had dark vision, which means they take heavily obscured areas basically outside and turn that into lightly obscured. So disadvantage on perception checks, but I wouldn't be able to hide from them, which is a good, interesting point of fact that was brought up with the hide action. So if I'm standing here and you're standing here at night and you don't have dark vision, one, you can't see me because you're effectively blinded, but I could choose to make the hide action. But if you have dark vision, now I'm not in a heavily obscured situation, so you could see me with disadvantage, but I could attempt to hide, but I don't know that you could see. So it's a lot of weird, interesting stuff, but it spelled it out, because it says you must make a DC 15 stealth check, which I like, because base anything, if you don't hit a DC 15 on your stealth check, you cannot hide. That is the number. It has to be at least 15 to successfully hide at all. And You have to be heavily obscured or behind 3/4 or total cover to do so. As I said, we were outside amongst trees and rocks, so I had the opportunity to gain 3/4 cover multiple times. So that's what I used primarily for my hiding. And it also says you must be out of any visible enemy's line of sight. If you can see a creature, you can discern whether it can see you. This was also very important because of that situation that I'm in where I can't see them, but they could see me. It also got exceptionally interesting with our Gloomstalker Ranger because every one of the enemies was relying on their dark vision to see him. And as you know, Gloomstalker Ranger has that ability where they are invisible or they can't be perceived by creatures that use dark vision to perceive them. So he was effectively invisible to every enemy on the battlefield because they were all using their dark vision to see him, which was, again, him using the base Ranger rules, or the base 5e Ranger rules, and using this version of the hide action was really interesting to see because he could see all of them and they couldn't see him, which I thought was a very interesting means that he could just, I mean, without even using the hide action, he was essentially invisible to them. And then on a successful check, meaning 15 or higher, you are considered hidden as per the hidden condition, which we'll get to in a sec. It says, make note of your check's total, which becomes the DC for any creature looking to find you with a perception check. So again, if you roll a 14, you are not hidden. You did not successfully hide. 15 or above, you did, but if you roll like a 27, which I think one of my rolls was a 27, then like that's the check to beat. And then you become hidden as per the condition, which is listed as you aren't affected by any effect that requires its target to be seen. So if you're hidden and they have a spell that says, a creature you can see, you're not affected by that. If you are hidden when you roll initiative, you have advantage on the roll, which I do think is how the new surprise is going to work in 1D&D, is that surprise isn't like, there's no surprise round. Surprise will be specific to certain instances. For example, I think alert, which I believe, I don't remember if alert is a feat. No, it's in the original 1D&D, which basically like gives you advantage on initiative and a couple other things. Or there's a couple instances that mention that if you are hidden when you make initiative or something like that, you take advantage or you have advantage on initiative like this. So I think that's how surprise is going to be handled as opposed to just like a freebie round. It says attacks affected, attack rolls against you have disadvantage and your attack rolls have advantage. And the condition ends on you immediately after any of the following occurrences. You make a sound louder than a whisper. An enemy finds you. You make an attack roll, you cast a spell with a verbal component, or you aren't heavily obscured or behind cover. So, in theory, you can move around, but if you move around into an instance where you are not heavily obscured or behind cover, you are no longer considered hidden. So moving inherently doesn't make you visible, but where you move does, which I think makes sense. And I really, I'm going to gush on this for a little bit because I do believe the hidden condition and the hide action are very well designed, and I think it clears up. I mean, the amount of videos and the amount of threads and forum posts that I recall when 5e first came out about trying to figure out how hiding works. I'm sure many of you who have been around for the life of D&D 5e remember how many people were confused about how exactly it works. I used to get, like, sometimes I'd meet people at conventions when the channel was much smaller and we were just doing like the business card exchange because we're doing like media and interviews and stuff. And they would say, so you play D&D 5e? And I would say yes. And then I had legitimately one person say like, can you just sit down and explain to me the hiding and sneaking and how that works? Because it was so like kind of wishy-washy on the wording. So this, I think, is a very, very well done and clearly explained how this works. Now, another thing that I did was I decided to try the jump action. Now, normally I didn't need to do this, but we were in an area in the forest. It seemed like possibly, again, because we're in Greek mythology, hunters of Artemis were placing traps around, because I learned very early on when I fell into like a spike trap that there were traps all around the forest. So I said, okay, the less amount of time I can spend on the forest floor, the better. So I was like, okay, I'm on top of a rock. and I can move, but I still have my bonus action, which I can use to hide, and I still have my movement. So what I decided to do was take the jump action, because that is, in theory, depending on how you look at it, essentially like a different version of the dash action, right? The dash action lets you move, and then you have your actual movement, and then as a rogue, I could bonus action dash if I wanted to. But the instance here was I did not want to traverse on the ground. I wanted to traverse in the air. So, with the jump action, you attempt to leap more than 5 feet. A jump of 5 feet or less is treated as difficult terrain. So you could just basically move through it easily enough. When you take this action, your speed must be greater than 0, so you can't be basically grappled or restrained or anything. You must make a DC strength check, acrobatics, or athletics, which is nice because it gives you the option to take strength with acrobatics, which, again, I feel like 9 times out of 10, if you're an acrobatic character, you have more focus on dexterity than strength, but you might have proficiency in acrobatics, which could help to even things out. If you don't move at least 10 feet immediately before this action, you have disadvantage on the check. This kind of is the running aspect. In the past, it would shorten your distance. Here, it's just disadvantage, which is fine. On a failed check, you leap 5 feet horizontally or vertically. So you also don't like fall flat on your face. If you fail whatever the DC 10 strength check, you still move either 5 feet vertically or 5 feet horizontally. On a successful check, the check's total determines the distance in feet that you can clear horizontally, or half that total if you're jumping vertically, rounded down. This jump doesn't expend your movement, but the distance can't exceed your speed. So I happen to be a Thief Rogue, and if you recall, one of the options for the new Thief Rogue here is jump distance. When you take the jump action, you make a dexterity check instead of a strength check. So for me, I was basically just making an acrobatics check, a traditional acrobatics check using dexterity, and I ended up rolling, I think, a 17. So I was able to clear 17 feet horizontally on my jump. And then when I hit the ground, I still had 30 feet of movement, whether climb or otherwise, and still also had my bonus action. So I thought that that was done very well. I enjoyed the jump action. I can see the lack of, or the sort of redundancy here. You could possibly build the jump action into the dash action if you wanted to consolidate things. But I do kind of, I think I appreciate the separation. Jump is for jumping and dash is for running. And I think that works out. It separates out the concept of like, well, what if I have a triple, like there was the, this also may lead potentially to alterations to things like the Ring of Jumping or the Jump spell, because they triple your jump distance. Or I think they triple your jump distance, so that could be an interesting interaction here, because if it triples it to the point where it exceeds your speed, then it kind of has like a diminishing returns at a point. Let's see. I don't believe much more came up out of the specific rules here. As I said, we talked about resistance and guidance. I used the search action. Once I had figured out that there were traps, I could use the search action as a bonus action as a thief. So when I was moving around, if I didn't want to accidentally fall in another pit trap, I could use that. I think other than that, I think everything else was pretty standard, but I think I very much am enjoying the flow of things as far as the One D&D Rogue goes. I have a little bit of things I can do, and for the most part, fundamentally, not much has changed for me. Heroic Inspiration was in effect, although nobody rolled a natural one that stuck. Most of the natural ones that were rolled were counteracted by advantage in some way, so we didn't actually get any Heroic Inspiration during the course of the combat. Just a couple other things that that I want to just get out there. One, I'm excited when we get to higher levels as a Thief Rogue, when I'll be able to do the new version of Use Magic Device and get access to spell scrolls, because then I can effectively also act as a healer and support in that way by still being sort of a potential melee damage dealing class. I also have a proficiency in Arcana, and if I were to hit level 11 with Reliable Talent, I think I'd be able to use up to a 5th level scroll with no chance of failure, which is pretty cool. So I'm excited for that. I'm not, as of right now, like I said, I still wouldn't have evasion in the base 5e rogue because we're only level 4. So I'm not really, I don't feel like I'm missing out on much. I like that it's martial weapons that have the finesse property, which does mean that I am able to use like a whip as a weapon if I wanted to. Which did lead me to something that I thought was interesting, and that I brought up during the course um, of the game. That I feel like a lot of people, when they think of like a whip in combat, they think more about its like utility uses for like pulling something out of somebody's hand or tripping or grabbing something and like, taking somebody's feet out from underneath them or like pulling them out of a tree or, Indiana Jones swinging across a gap, things of that nature. And I do feel like a whip only does a d4 damage, so it's not like I think it could benefit from some other aspect of combat utility, and it's offset by the fact that it only does a d4 damage. So I happened to be in a situation where one of the people that was attacking us was up in a tree, and I was 10 feet below them within the reach of a whip. So I was in theory going to try to like wrap around their ankle and pull them from the tree, or at least attempt to. But that's not an option, so it does make me feel like whips should get the special property in 1D&D, and perhaps this will be fixed with the way we hear that warrior classes will have some new form of combat options. So I'm thinking possibly something like that might happen. But other than that, the only other things that kind of came up in the playtest, which are not well, actually, we don't know how non-lethal damage works in terms of the playtest. So we're still using the base 5e rules for non-lethal damage, which I do think there should be an option for like blunted tipped arrows or things of that nature, so that you can like at range do non-lethal damage. I realize that that makes potentially less sense, but I'm trying to go something different on my thief rogue character. One, to be different than the norm, but also to do something I've never done, and that is I've decided that he doesn't kill people. So like that's like a line that he doesn't cross. Although I did enough damage to knock somebody out, but the DM didn't understand my concept of I had a blunted tipped arrow, and she still had it like go through them, which is realistically, an arrow might still do that, but I was trying to save it for like a cool reveal during the course of the battle, but it didn't come up. But yeah, that he doesn't kill people, which I thought was an interesting concept for a rogue, but also interesting in that in theory, sneak attack still allows me to do all that extra damage, but non-lethally. Um, it does say you know how to turn a subtle attack into a deadly one, but I believe that's just descriptive. So I'm curious to see. I'm assuming whenever the warrior classes come out is when we'll get the information about how non-lethal damage works, if it changes at all. Um, but it does make me just wish for like maybe like a Hawkeye Green Arrow boxing glove on the end of an arrow, so you can hit somebody and knock them out from a distance. Um, But yeah, I'm trying to think. I think one of the other, like I said, one of the other coolest things that happened was the interaction with the Dark Vision and the Gloomstalker's capabilities. Um, I don't think the Ranger had much that came up other than the spell casting was the big one that he did primarily. He did cast Hunter's Mark out the gate on somebody, which did allow him to have that up non-concentration. So he was allowed to put Hunter's Mark on somebody, and then I think he had used another spell like possibly either Zephyr Strike or was going to use Entangle, but could still do that with favored enemy up. The only interesting, you can end it as a bonus action if you so choose, so you don't have to worry about that. But other than that, I don't think he had anything specific um, that he had used that was tied to this. I mean, we had the first round of combat, so we got to do his Gloomstalker thing. He's got the expertise in the skills. That's good. Favorite enemy is the free Hunter's Mark. That's non-concentration. Um, I also feel like Hunter's Mark should, you should get some castings of it for free without expending spell slots, because as a 4th level character, he has 3 first level slots, and he has this cool thing where he can cast Hunter's Mark. He has it always prepared, and it doesn't count for concentration. It lasts full duration, all that stuff. I think you should get possibly proficiency bonus times per long rest, the ability to cast it without a spell slot at first level. And if you would like to cast it with a higher level, to increase the duration, that it will use whatever required spell slots. I think that would be a fix I would make, because it's cool that it's auto prepared, but the fact that you're still tapping into that still limited pool does feel a little weak. And I still stand by Hunter's Mark as a spell that's kind of a free, that's always prepared and non-concentration, still doesn't classify as a ranger's unique identifier, like a class identity. It's cool, it's a useful thing, but I don't think it really hits that what is the ranger class identity aspect of it. I will say that through a feat, a starting feat, he does have a find familiar, which is nice because it helps it does feel more like his character is a ranger because he has a find familiar, which further leads me to my point about I do feel like possibly the animal companion aspect should be the class identity for the ranger. Now, it doesn't have to be anything, in theory, it doesn't have to be anything more than essentially a find familiar, and then maybe the Beastmaster Ranger has a beefed up, a better version of it. My Ranger fix that I've never officially fully released does have kind of rules and mechanics for this. So I do feel like that might be the way to go, just to give them identity and make them feel unique. But I'm curious to hear what your thoughts and opinions are in the the comments down below. Like I said, next week hopefully will be more on track and not run as long, so that I can get the entire group together and then we can all talk about it and you can get the perspective from everybody else. But like I said, it was interesting to see the new hide and hidden rules were pretty good. I liked trying the jump action. The bonus action healing from durable is nice. It could be a little bit more. I believe there's a magic item that lets you increase the amount you heal when you heal with hit dice. So I might be looking for one of those in the game if the DM will allow me to look for it. The light weapon property, once again, comes in handy. I also appreciate, again, as I said, the updated versions of guidance and resistance. Quite useful to have in combat. It also is one of those things where, like, potentially in the other games, maybe only one of you would take something like guidance because you would just spam it for everybody. This instance would be better for if you have multiple people to have either guidance or resistance or both, so that, like, you have that option if you can all stay relatively close together within that 10 feet of one another. You'll have the option to possibly help people bail them out of failed saves or ability checks. So, I think that's pretty much it, folks. Yeah, I'm curious to see how things go. It was a tough fight. I really enjoyed it. Got a little hairy at the end there. We were all out of, the spell slots were gone. Nobody has potions, which is going to be a thing I think we do when we get to the next big town, is buy some potions. But yeah, all in all, I think so far I'm still enjoying the Rogue experience. I'm enjoying playing the Thief. Had we started later, I definitely would have been trying out this new version of the Cleric, but maybe I'll see if I can find another game where I'll be able to play as the Cleric, or at least run a game for a One D&D Cleric, because I'm very curious to see how it works at the table. So anyway, folks, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.